Hello everybody, I want to tell you about one of my favourite books. It's called The Shadow of the Wind and it is by a Spanish writer called Carlos Ruiz Zafón. It is a brilliant book and I always feel for me an indication of a really good book is one that I want to read more than once, and there's a limited number of those books, and this is one of them, and it's part of a series of, I think it's 3 or 4 books. Anyway, I've read all of them and I've read a couple of them more than once, and it's a great book if you like something that has a really good plot-driven narrative, a plot-driven story, which I really like. It's very much a kind of mystery, almost like a detective type of story, where you become part of the sort of detective process. So it really kind of takes you on a whole journey of mystery and intrigue, and takes you across mainly Spain, but also goes into France, if my memory serves correctly. And it's a great story, which I'm going to read an extract from in a moment. The narrator of the story is called Daniel, and his mother died when he was very young, and his father owns a bookshop, and the bit that I'm going to start from in a moment is from the very opening of the novel, which begins, you realise quite quickly that he is talking as a grown-up, looking back on when he was a child and a particular memory that has stayed firmly imprinted in his mind, and that is connected to his mother's death and to the day when he realises that he can't remember what she looks like, and his father takes him out in the early hours to this magical place called the Cemetery of Forgotten Books. So I'm going to start reading that in a moment. In a moment, I'm going to read the opening of the novel, and so the first chapter is called The Cemetery of Forgotten Books. What you can see on the screen is just one short extract from that, and one of the things I love about Carlos Ruiz Zafón is his imagery. He uses such beautiful language and such beautiful similes. Some of those bits are in bold on the screen in front of you. And I like this novel so much that I've even used this for teaching as well. I still remember the day my father took me to the Cemetery of Forgotten Books for the first time. It was the early summer of 1945, and we walked through the streets of a Barcelona trapped beneath ashen skies as dawn poured over Rambla de Santa Monica in a wreath of liquid copper. Daniel, you mustn't tell anyone what you're about to see today, my father warned. Not even your friend Thomas. No one. Not even Mummy. My father sighed, hiding behind the sad smile that followed him like a shadow all through his life. Of course you can tell her, he answered, heavy-hearted. We keep no secrets from her. You can tell her everything. Shortly after the Civil War, an outbreak of cholera had taken my mother away. We buried her in Montjuic on my 4th birthday. The only thing I can recall is that it rained all day and all night, and that when I asked my father whether heaven was crying, he couldn't bring himself to reply. 6 years later, my mother's absence remained in the air around us, a deafening silence that I had not yet learned to stifle with words. My father and I lived in a modest apartment in Cal Santa Ana, a stone's throw away from the church square. The apartment was directly above the bookshop, a legacy from my grandfather that specialised in rare collector's editions and second-hand books, an enchanted bazaar which my father hoped would one day be mine. I was raised among books, making invisible friends in pages that seemed cast from dust and whose smell I carried on my hands to this day. As a child, I learned to fall asleep talking to my mother in the darkness of my bedroom, telling her about the day's events, my adventures at school, and the things that I'd been taught. I couldn't hear her voice or feel her touch, but her radiance and her warmth haunted every corner of our home, and I believed, with the innocence of those who still count their age on their 10 fingers, that if I closed my eyes and spoke to her, she would be able to hear me wherever she was. Sometimes my father would listen to me from the dining room, crying in silence. On that June morning, I woke up screaming at first light. My heart was pounding in my chest as if my very soul was trying to escape. My father hurried into my room and held me in his arms, trying to calm me. I can't remember her face. I can't remember Mummy's face, I muttered, breathless. My father held me tight. Don't worry, Daniel. I'll remember for both of us. We looked at each other in the half light, searching for words that didn't exist. For the first time I realised my father was growing old. He stood up and drew the curtains to let in the pale glint of dawn. Come, Daniel, get dressed. I want to show you something, he said. Now? At 5 o'clock in the morning? Some things can only be seen in the shadows, my father said, flashing a mysterious smile probably borrowed from the pages of one of his worn Alexandre Dumas romances. Night watchmen still lingered in the misty streets when we stepped out on the front door. The lamps along the Ramblers marked out an adventure, an avenue, in the early morning haze as the city awoke, like a watercolour slowly coming to life. When we reached Cal Arco de Teatro, we continued through its arch towards the Ravel Quarter, entering a vault of blue haze. I followed my father through that narrow lane, more of a scar than a street, until the glimmer of the Ramblers faded behind us. The brightness of dawn filtered down from balconies and cornices in streaks of slanting light that dissolved before touching the ground. At last my father stopped in front of a large door of carved wood, blackened by time and humidity. Before us loomed what to my eyes seemed the carcass of a palace, a place of echoes and shadows. Daniel, you mustn't tell anyone what you're about to see today, not even your friend Thomas. No one. And that is the opening chapter of the novel. It's a brilliant novel. Read it, enjoy it.